Chapter 7.
We got donuts from the grocery store.
I feed my kids a lot of sugar.
Yes, you do.
'Cause you love it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't leave me alone. A cry and... Oh. Don't leave me alone. A cry in the night of anguish heart-striking, of soul-killing fright. The restlessness of the fire lizards about her woke Manoli from a deep sleep. She wished irritably that they didn't insist on sleeping with her. It had been an exciting and trying day, and she'd had a hard enough time getting to sleep. Her hand ached so from the day's playing that she'd had to slather the scar with numbweed to dull the pain. Beauty's tail twitched violently against Manoli's ear. She nudged the little queen, hoping to stir her out of whatever dream disturbed her. But Beauty was awake, not dreaming, her eyes yellow and whirling with anxiety. All the fire lizards were awake and unusually alert in the dark of the night. Seeing that Manoli's eyes were open, Beauty crooned, a half-fearful, half-worried sound. Rocky and Diver minced up Manoli's legs and crouched on her stomach, extending their heads towards her. Their eyes, too, were whirling with the speed and shade of fear. The rest cuddled close to her, against her, crooned for comfort. Goodness, you guys.
What?
This chapter is 25 pages.
Wow.
We're only going to be able to go about 12.
15.
Okay. Propping herself up on one elbow, Manoli peered toward the open windows. She could just distinguish the fort-hold fire heights, black against dark sky. It took her some time to locate the dark bulk of the watch dragon. He was motionless, so whatever distressed the fire lizards did not, apparently, concern him. Whatever is your problem, Beauty? The little queen's croon increased its intensity. First Rocky, then Diver added their notes. Aunties 1 and 2 crept up and nuzzled to get under Manoli's left arm. Lazy, Mimic, and Uncle burrowed into the fur at her right side, their twin tails latching fiercely onto her wrist while Brownie piteously paced across her feet. They were afraid. What's gotten into you? Manoli couldn't for the life of her imagine anything within the Harpercraft Hall that would menace them. Covet them, yes. Injure them? No. Shush a minute and let me listen. Beauty and Rocky gave a little spurting sound of fear, but they obeyed her. She listened as hard as she could, but the only sounds on the night air were the comfortable murmur of men's voices and an occasional laugh from the hall beneath her. It wasn't as late as it had first seemed to her then, if the masters and older journeymen were still chatting. Gently disengaging tails, Manoli slipped from her sleeping furs to the window. Several rectangles of light shone on the stones of the courtyard, 2 from the great hall and 1 above it, from Robinton's quarters beyond hers. Beauty gave a worried cheep and flew to Manoli's shoulder, wrapping her tail tightly around the girl's neck and burrowing into her hair, the slender little body trembling. The others set up an anxious clamor from the firs, so Manoli hurriedly returned to them. They were panic-stricken. The Master Harper might not approve of Sylvina's moving her into this room if her fire lizards disturbed his studies at night. She tried to quiet them with a soft song, but now Beauty's voice rose querulously above her lullaby. Manoli gathered all the fire lizards against her. Their tails twined about her arms so firmly that she couldn't use her hands to stroke them. Now she felt a confused sense of imminent danger. Clearly, all the fire lizards were responding to a mutually experienced threat. Manoli fought against the panic their fear stirred in her. You're being ridiculous. What can harm us in the harbor hall? Beauty on one side, Rocky on the other, stroked her face urgently with their heads, cheeping in mounting distress. Through their touch and mind, she got the distinct impression that they were reacting to a fear beyond them, beyond the walls, at a distance. Then how could it hurt you? Suddenly, their terror erupted in her with such intensity that she cried out. Don't! Her injunction was spontaneous. She tried to throw up her arms to protect herself from this unknown danger, but her hands were lizard-bound. Their fear was completely and utterly hers, and incoherently she repeated the cry, Don't! Don't! In her mind, out of nowhere, Manoli received an indelible impression of turbulence. Savage, ruthless, destructive, a pressure inexorable and deadly, churning masses of slick, sickly gray surfaces that heaved and dipped. Heat as massive as a tidal wave. Fear, terror, and inarticulate longing. A scream heard in her mind. A scream like a knife upon raw nerves. "Don't leave me alone!" Manoli didn't think she had cried out. She was, as far as she could think sanely, certain that she hadn't heard the cry, but she knew that the words had been spoken at the extreme of someone's anguish. Simultaneously, the door to her room burst open, and the watch dragon on the hold fire heights let out a shriek so like the one in her mind that she wondered if the dragon had called before. But dragons don't speak. "Manoli, what's wrong?" Master Robinson was striding across the floor to her. The fire lizards took wing, darting out one window and back in the next, maniacal with fear. "The dragon!" Manoli pointed, diverting Robinson's eyes to the window to prove that she wasn't alone in alarm. They both saw the watch dragon launching himself, riderless, into the sky, bugling his distress. Robinson and Manoli heard on the night air the faint echo of answering bugles, a moment of silence, and then the eerie screech of a hysterical watchwear from the fort hold court. "Is every winged thing in the hold out of its mind?" asked Robinson. "What made you scream, Manoli? Don't what?" "I don't know," Manoli cried, tears streaming down her face. She experienced a profound grief now and hugged herself against the chill of an awe-filled panic she couldn't explain and had experienced so profoundly. "I just don't know." Robinson ducked his beauty, leading the others swooped past him and out the window. The queen was screaming at the others to follow. Manoli saw them outlined briefly by the light of the Master Harper's window, and then the entire fair disappeared. Before Manoli, frightened for fear the fire lizards had gone completely from her, could tell Master Robinson, Domick came charging into the room. "Robinson, what's going on?" "Quiet, Domick!" The Master Harper's stern voice interrupted. "Whatever has frightened Manoli has also alarmed the watch dragon, and even the dead could hear the watchwares howling. Furthermore, the dragon went between without his rider." "What?" Domick was startled, no longer angry. "Manoli," said Robinson, his hands warm and firm on her shoulders, his voice kindly calm. "Take a deep breath. Now take another." I can't. Something terrible is happening." And Manoli was appalled at the sobs that tore at her, the cold terror that made her tremble so violently in the grip of this unknown disaster. "It's something terrible." Others were crowding into her room now, roused by her involuntary cries. Someone said loudly that there wasn't anything stirring in the court or on any of the roads. Another remarked that it was ridiculous to be startled out of a sound sleep by a hysterical child trying to attract attention. "Hold your silly tongue, Marshal," said Sylvina, pushing through the crowd to Manoli's bed. "Better still, get off to your beds, all of you. You're no help here." "Yes, if you'd please leave," said Robinson, in a voice as close to anger as anyone had ever heard him. "It isn't the eggs hatching, is it?" Sibel asked anxiously. Manoli shook her head, struggling to control herself and to stop the spasmodic shudders of fear that were depriving her of voice and wit enough to explain what was so inexplicable. Sylvina was soothing her. "Her hands are ice cold, Robinson," she said, and Manoli clung to the woman as Robinson slipped to the other side of the double cot to support her shuddering body. "And these aren't hysterical tremors." Abruptly the spasms eased, then ceased completely. Manoli went limp against Sylvina, gasping for breath, forcing herself to breathe as deeply again as Robinson again urged her to do so. "Whatever was wrong has stopped," she said, spent. Sylvina and the Harper eased her against the bed rushes, Sylvina drawing the fur up to her neck. "Did the fire lizards take a fit?" the head woman asked, glancing about the now bright room. "They're not here. I saw them go between. I don't know where. They were so afraid. It was incredible. There was nothing I could do." "Take your time and tell us," said the Master Harper. "I don't know all of it. I woke because they were so restless. They usually sleep quietly. And they got more and more frightened, and There wasn't anything. Nothing. I could see that. Yes, but something caused them to react. Robinson had captured her hand and was stroking it reassuringly. Tell us the sequence. They were frightened out of their wits, and it got me too then. And Manoli swallowed quickly against that flash of vivid impression. Then, in my mind, I was aware of something so dangerous, so terrible, something heaving and gray and deadly. Masses of it, all gray and terrible. Hot, too. Yes, the heat was part of the terror. And then a longing, I don't know which was the worst. She clutched at the comforting hands and could not keep back the sobs of fright that rose from her guts. I wasn't asleep either. It wasn't just a bad dream. Don't talk anymore, Manoli. We can hope the terror has passed completely. No, I have to tell you. That's part of it. I'm supposed to tell. Then I heard, only I didn't hear. Except that it was as clear as if someone had shouted it right in this room, right inside my head. I heard something scream, "Don't leave me alone!" The muscles in her body relaxed all at once now that she had spoken of the weight of terror. Don't leave me alone. The harper repeated the words half to himself, puzzling over the significance of the phrase. It's all gone now. Being afraid, I mean. And the fire lizard swooped back into the room, aiming for the bed, but some of them dipped and darted for the window ledges away from Master Robinson and Sylvina, twittering, but only with surprise, not fear. But Beauty and the two bronzes landed on the foot of the double cot, chirping at Manoli with little calls that sounded so normally inquisitive that Manoli let out an exasperated exclamation. Don't scold them, Beauty, said the Master Harper. See if you can determine where they've just been. Manoli beckoned to Beauty.
Hold on, can you pause? I have to pee really bad.
Manoli beckoned to Beauty, who obediently crawled up to her arm and permitted Manoli to stroke her head and body. She's certainly not bothered by anything now. Yes, but where did she go? Manoli raised Beauty to her face, looking into the idly whirling eyes, laying the back of her hand against Beauty's cheek. Where'd you go, pet? Where have you just been? Beauty stroked Manoli's hand, gave a smug chirp, cocking her dainty head to one side. But an impression reached Manoli's mind of a weir ball and many dragons and excited people. I think they've been back to Bend and Weir. It must be Bendon. They don't know Fort Weir well enough to be that vivid. And whatever happened involved many dragons and lots of excited people. I asked Beauty what frightened her. Manoli stroked the little queen's head for a moment longer to reassure her, because the question was sure to upset the little fire lizard. It did. Beauty launched herself from Manoli's arms so violently that her talons scratched deep enough to draw blood. A dragon falling in the sky! Manoli gasped out the picture. Dragons don't fall in the sky! She scratched you, child. Oh, that's nothing, Master Robinson, but I don't think we'll get anything more out of her. Beauty was clinging to the fireplace, chittering irritably, her eyes wheeling angrily orange. If something has happened at Bend and Weir, Master Robinson, remarked Sylvina in a dry tone of voice, they won't be over long in sending for you. Sylvina had to raise her voice to counteract the excited circles of the other creatures, fire lizards, who were reacting to Beauty's scolding. We'd best not upset the creatures any further now. And I'm getting you a dose, young lady, or you'll never sleep tonight from the look of your eyes. I didn't mean to disturb everyone. Sylvina gave her an exasperated snort, dismissing the need for an apology, although Manoli couldn't help but see, as Sylvina opened the door, that Harpers were lingering in the corridors. Manoli heard Sylvina berating them and telling them to get off to their beds. What did they think they knew about fire lizards? The strangest aspect of this incident, Manoli, said the Master Harper, his forehead creased with thought lines, is that the dragon reacted too. I have never seen a dragon, short of a mating flight, go off without his rider. I shouldn't wonder, and Robinson smiled wryly, if we don't have Teledon over here demanding an explanation from you for the disappearance of his dragon. The notion of a dragon rider compelled to ask her for advice was so absurd that Manoli managed a weak smile. How's that hand? You've been playing a lot, I hear. And the Master Harper turned her left hand over in his. That scar's too red. You've been doing too much. Make haste a little more slowly. Is it painful? Not much. Master Oldive gave me some salve. And your feet? So long as I don't have to stand too much or walk too far. Too bad your fire lizards can't combine to give you one little dragon power. Sir? Yes? I think I ought to tell you. My fire lizards can lift things. They brought me my pipes the other day, to spare me the walk, she added hastily. They took it from my room at the cot, all in a cluster, and then dropped it into my hands. Now that is very interesting. I didn't realize they had so much initiative. You know, Brecky, Miriam, and Fnor have got theirs to carry messages on a collar about their necks. The Master Harper smiled with amusement, though they aren't always good about arriving promptly. I think you have to make certain they know how urgent the matter is. Like having your pipes for Master Durant? I didn't wish to be late, and I can't walk fast. We'll let that stand as the reason, then, Manoli, said Robinson gently. And when Manoli glanced up at him, startled, she saw the kind understanding in his eyes and flushed. He stroked her hand again. What I don't know, I sometimes guess, knowing the way people interact, Manoli. Don't keep so much bottled inside, girl. And do tell me anything unusual that your fire lizards do. That's far more important than why they did it. We don't know much about these tiny cousins of the dragons, and I have a suspicion they'll be very important creatures to us. Is the little white dragon all right? Reading my mind too, Manoli? Little Ruth is all right. But the Harper's heavy, slightly hesitant tone gave the lie to his reassurance. Don't fret yourself about Jackson and Ruth. Just about everyone else on Pern does. He placed her hand back on the furs with a final pat.
Do you see the black fog too? It's passing over the camera.
No. Sylvina returned, offering Manoli the mug she'd brought, and stood over her while she downed the dose, gagging a little at the bitterness. Yes, I know. I made it strong on purpose. You need to sleep. And Master Robinson, there's a messenger from the hold for you below. Urgent, he said, and he's out of breath. Sleep yourself out, Manoli, the Harper said as he rapidly left the room. Trouble? Manoli asked Sylvina, hoping to be told something. Not for you, or because of you, my girl. Sylvina chuckled, pushing the sleeping fur under Manoli's chin. I understand that Grohe, Lord of Fort Hold, experienced the same unnerving nightmare, as he calls it, that you did, and has sent for Master Robinson to explain it to him. Now rest, and don't fuss yourself. How could I? You must have doubled that dose of Fellis juice, said Manoli, relaxed and tactless in the grip of the drug. She couldn't keep her eyes open and effortlessly drifted to sleep to the sound of another chuckle from Sylvina. One last thought let her slip easily into unconsciousness. Lord Grohe's fire lizard had reacted, so she wasn't hysterical. She awoke slightly at one point, not quite conscious of her surroundings, but aware of a rumbling voice, a treble response, and hungry creelings. When she woke completely later, there was an empty bowl on the floor, and her friends were curled up about her in slumbering balls, wing limp. The gnawing in her stomach suggested that she had slept well into the day, and the hunger was all her own. If the fire lizards had been that starved, they'd have been awake. Doubtless Camo and Peemer had done her the favor of feeding her friends. She grinned. Peemer and Camo must have been delighted at the chance. The shutters were open, and with no sounds of music or voices, she guessed it must be afternoon and the hall's population dispersed to their various chores. The watch dragon was back on the fire heights. She sat upright in bed as the memory of the previous night's terror shattered her pleasant somnolence. At the same moment there was a tap on her door, and before she could answer, Sylvina entered carrying a small tray. My timing's very good, she said, pleased and smiling. Do you feel rested? Manoli nodded in reply and thanked Sylvina for the hot claw she was handed. But if I can be bold, you don't look as if you slept at all. Sylvina's eyes were dark-circled and red-shot. Well, you're right. And you're not bold, but I'm on my way to bed, I can assure you, as soon as I've straightened up for Robinson. Now. And Sylvina nudged Manoli's hips so the girl made room for her to sit on the bed. You ought to hear what disturbed your friends last night. No one else will think to tell you with the Harper away. Also, I've just checked the eggs, and I think you should take a look at them. Not, however, until you've finished your claw. And Sylvina put a restraining hand on Manoli's shoulder. I want your wits in place and not Fellis-fuddled. What happened? The bare bones of the matter are that Fnor, Brown Canth's rider, took it into his head to go to the Red Star last night. Manoli's gasp woke the fire lizards. Mind your thoughts, girl. I don't want them turning hysterical again. Thank you. Sylvina waited until the creatures had settled back into their naps. That's what seems to have set the fire lizards off at any rate. And not just yours. Robinson said that anyone who has a fire lizard had the same trouble you did, only with your having 9, it was intensified. What happened was that Canth and Fnor went between to the Red Star. Yes, small wonder you were terrified. What you told us about grayness and all that hideous heat and churning, that's what's on the Red Star. No one could land there. She paused, gave a smug grunt. That'll shut up the Lord Holders for wanting to go there. Canth and Fnor? Manoli felt fear stab coldly up her throat, and she remembered the scream. They're alive, but only just. And when you said, "Don't leave me alone," what you heard, and it had to be through your fire lizards, was Brecky calling out to Fnor and Canth. Sylvina broke her narrative for effect. Somehow they got back. Well, part way back from the Red Star. It must have been the most incredible sight. Sylvina's tired eyes narrowed, reconstructing that vision. The reason the hold dragon took off was to help land Canth. It was like a path, Robinson tells us, of dragons in the air, catching Canth and Fnor and breaking their fall. They were both senseless, of course. Robinson says there isn't a scrap of hide left on Canth, as if some mighty hand had sanded his skin away. Fnor's not much better for all he wore werehide. Sylvina, how could my fire lizards know what was happening at Bend and Weir? Ramoth called the dragons. The Bend and Queen can do that, you know. Your fire lizards have been at Bend and Weir. Perhaps they heard her too. Sylvina dismissed that part of the mystery impatiently. But Sylvina, my fire lizards were afraid long before Ramoth called the Fort Dragon. Even before I heard Brecky call. Why, that's right. Oh well, we'll find the answer to that mystery in due time. We always do with the Harper Hall. If dragons can talk to dragons across distance, why can't fire lizards? Dragons think sense, Manoli said, gently scratching her waking queen's little head, and these beauties don't. At least not often. Babies don't make sense, and your fire lizards aren't all that long out of the shell. But think on it, Manoli. Camo doesn't make much sense, but he does have feelings. Was it he who fed my fire lizards this morning so I could sleep? He and Peemer. Camo fussed and fussed before breakfast until I had to send him up here with Peemer to shut his moans. Sylvina's chuckle was half amusement, half remembered irritation. Nag, nag, nag about pretties hungry, feed pretties. Peemer said you didn't wake. Did you? No, but the matter of fire lizard intelligence was more urgent in Manoli's estimation. I suppose being at Bend and Weir might explain their reaction. Not entirely, Sylvina replied briskly. Lord Grohy's little friend responded too. It wasn't hatched at Bend and has never been there. There may well be more to these creatures than being silly pets after all, and making idiots of men who fancy themselves as good as dragon riders. I've finished my claw. Shall we see the eggs now? Yes, by all means. If his eggs should hatch without the harbor, we'd never hear the end of it. Is Sibel about? Hovering. Sylvina's grimace was so maliciously expressive that Manoli laughed. How are your feet today? Only stiff. Just remember that the salve doesn't do you any good in the jar. Yes, Sylvina. Don't you yes, Sylvina, me meekly, my girl. And there was unexpected warmth and affection in the woman's tone. Manoli smiled shyly back at the as the headwoman left the room. She dressed quickly in one of the new tunics and the blue warehide trousers, plumped up the rushes in their bag, and smoothed the sleeping fur over all. Sylvina had just finished tidying up the Harper's room when Manoli entered, Beauty winging in gracefully behind her. She landed on Manoli's shoulder, and as Manoli checked both eggs, peered with equally curious interest. She chirped a question at Manoli. Well, drawled Sylvina, now that you experts have conferred... Manoli giggled. I don't think Beauty knows any more than I do. She's never seen eggs hatch, but they are a good deal harder. They've been kept so nicely warm. I don't know for sure, but I suspect they'll hatch any time now. Sylvina drew in her breath sharply, startling Beauty. That Harper! The problem will be keeping track of him. She gave the rush bag a final poke and twitched the sleeping fur straight. If Lord Grohy, and Sylvina jerked her head toward the Fort Hold palisade, isn't sending for him, Flar is, or Lord Lytol for that white dragonette. If he wants to impress his fire lizard, he'll have to make a choice, won't he? Sylvina gaped at Manoli for a long moment and then burst out laughing. Might be the best thing that's happened since the queens were killed, Sylvina said, mopping laugh tears from her eyes. That man's had no more than a few hours of sleep a day. Sylvina gestured toward the study room, flicking her fingers at the scattered piles of records, the scrawls on the sand table's surface,
I'm taller than you.
The half-empty wine sack with its pouring neck collapsed ludicrously to one side. He won't miss the impression of his fire lizard, but isn't there some sign to tell if the hatching is imminent? The dragon men can tell, and what the harper's doing is really urgent. When Beauty and the others hatch, the old queen in her flight hums, sort of deep in the throat, Manoli said cautiously, after a moment's thought. Sylvina nodded encouragingly. This isn't Beauty's clutch, so I don't know if she'll react. Though the dragons at Bend and Weir hummed for Remoth's clutch, so it seems logical that the fire lizards would react the same way. Sylvina agreed. There'd be a slight interval in which we could track the harper down, supposing we can't get him to stay put here for the next day or two. Manoli hesitated, reluctant to agree to a conclusion achieved by guesswork. And they eat anything when they hatch? Asked Sylvina, who appeared content with the supposition. Just about. Manoli remembered the sack of spider claws, not the easiest of edibles, that had gone down the throats of her newly hatched friends. Red meat is best. That will please Camo, Sylvina said cryptically. Now, I think you'd best stay here. Well, what's wrong with that? Robinson would give up more than the privacy of his quarters to have a fire lizard. He's even threatened to forgo his wine. Sylvina had a snort for that unlikely sacrifice. But what is wrong with you? Sylvina, it's afternoon, isn't it? Yes, indeed. I'm pledged to go. I must go to Master Schonecker. He was very insistent. Oh, he was he? And will he explain to Master Robinson that your voice is more important than the harper's fire lizard? Oh, don't get yourself in a pucker. Sibel can sit in for you. And you tell your fire lizards to stand by. Sylvina walked to the open window and peered down into the courtyard. Peemer, ask Sibel to step up to the harper's room, will you? Manoli? Yes, she's awake and here. No, she can't attend Master Schonecker until Sibel arrives. Yes. We'll go through the choir hall to the journeyman's quarters and give Master Schonecker my message. Manoli answers to Master Robinson first, me second, and then any of the other masters who require her attention. Manoli fretted about Master Schonecker's certain wrath, while Sylvina made her wait until Peemer had found and returned at a run with Sibel. They're hatching? Sibel slithered to a stop in the doorway, breathing hard, his face flushed and anxious. Not quite yet, Manoli said, ready to speed to Master Schonecker, but unwilling to brush impolitely past the journeyman blocking the entrance. How will I know? Manoli says the fire lizards hum, replied Sylvina. Schonecker insists on her presence now. He would. Where's the harper? At Ruatha Hold by now, I think, Sylvina said. He went off to Bend and Weir when the dragon rider came for him. He said he'd stop off to see Master Smith Fanderel at Telgar. Sibel's eyes went from Sylvina to Manoli in surprise, as if Sylvina were being indiscreet. More than any other, saving yourself, Manoli will need to know how many tunes a harper, much less the harper, plays, she said. I'll send more claw, and, now she chuckled, have Camo lay about with that hatchet of his on the meat. Manoli told the fire lizards to stay by Sibel, and then she scurried down the steps and across the courtyard to the chorus hall. Despite Sylvina's reassurance, Manoli was apprehensive as she made her tardy arrival before Master Schonecker, but he said nothing. That made her dereliction harder. He kept looking at her until she nervously began to shift her weight from foot to foot. I do not know what it is about you, young Manoli, that you can disrupt an entire craft hall, for you are not presumptuous. In fact, you are immodestly modest. You do not brag, nor flaunt your rank, nor put yourself forward. You listen, which I assure you is a pleasure and a relief. And you learn from what you are told, which is veritably unheard of. I begin to entertain hope that I have finally discovered, in a mere slip of a girl, the dedication required of a true musician, an artist. Yes, I might even coax a real voice out of your throat. His fist came down with an almighty wallop on the sand table, the opposite end flapping onto its supports. She jumped. But even I cannot do much if you are not here. Sylvina said, Sylvina is a wonderful woman. Without her, the hall would be in chaos and our comfort ignored, Master Schonecker said, still in a loud tone. She is also a good musician. You didn't know that? You should make the occasion to listen to her singing, my dear girl. But, Again the voice boomed, Master Shonager's belly bouncing, although the rest of him seemed stationary. "I thought I had made it plain that you are to be here without fail every single day." "Yes, sir." "Come fog, fire, or fall! Have I made myself plain enough?" "Yes, sir." "Then," and his voice dropped to normal proportions, "let us begin with breathing." Manoli fought the desire to giggle. She mastered it by breathing deeply, and then settled quickly to the discipline of the lesson. When Master Shonager had dismissed her with a further injunction to be on time, not the next day, which was a rest day, and he needed his rest, but the day following, the work parties were back from their chores. To her surprise, she was greeted by many of the boys as she raced past them to get back to the fire lizard eggs. She answered, smiling, unsure of names and faces, but inwardly warmed by their recognition. As she took the steps to the higher level 2 at a time, she wondered if the boys all knew about the previous night's disturbance.